All right. Hello, Daniel Nation. Welcome to our monthly podcast. It is great to have everybody back on again this month. And our guest this month is a special person to both Kristen Bentley and myself, Dr. Tom Oliverson, whom you're about to meet here in just a moment. We met him in the 88th session of the Texas legislature when we were working on basically getting a gender modification bill prohibition passed in the state of Texas. And Kristen was very much a part of that. She was on the Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids subcommittee for the Republican Party. And that's actually how I met Kristen, was through championing this issue for protecting children. And so just very excited to have Dr. Oliverson on this show tonight. And also want to welcome Kristen Bentley again as my co-host. She's helping me to interview Dr. Oliverson tonight. You might remember her from last month's podcast, and we talked about an update on Stop Sexualizing Texas Kids and House Bill 900, the Reader Act, where we are with that, and just litigation going on in the courts around HB 900 and SB 14. So we're just going to jump right into this interview tonight, and I'm going to ask a set of questions. Then Kristen's going to ask a set of questions, and by the end of the night, you're going to get to know what our policies need to be going into the 89th session. And Dr. Oliverson is such a champion for the Texas grassroots. Just a little bit of background on Dr. O. He is by trade an anesthesiologist, which is kind of close to my family's heart. Both of my aunt and uncle were nurse anesthetists at Baylor in Temple for many years, and they're retired now. And I've got two cousins who are both nurse anesthetists, and my dad was a nurse by trade. So got a couple of cousins that are nurses. My other aunt was a nurse as well. So we got a lot of medical profession in our family. So that's kind of something we have in common with Dr. Oliverson, but that is his profession by day. Although I think his profession now is basically how to save Texas from the terrible Dade Phelan, Speaker of the House. That's become his full-time job. But let me just, we want to jump right in here with the story of SB 14. This is how we met Dr. Oliverson. And I want to just share a quick excerpt out of my book, Dr. O, which is Daniel Nation, When Christians Take a Stand in Civil Government. I wrote about you in my book here on page 149, just a short excerpt. We were talking about when you were basically trying to get SB 14 passed in the Texas House, and the Democrats tried to amend your bill 19 times. By the way, this was the third time you tried to lay the bill out. The first two times got point of order to death. Had to go back to committee to fix these little typos. And then we had the transurrection shut down the Capitol. We can't forget about that, where we all got evacuated, had to get back on the buses and go home. But when you finally got to lay out the bill, there were 19 proposed amendments. And what impressed me most about you was how you kept such a cool head through every bit of it. And you never lost your temper. You never, snapped back at the Democrats trying to kill your bill. And you just methodically and systematically just went through the bill and basically used research and data to show how trans people who have changed their sex have the highest suicide rate, and it's most detrimental to their health. And you came at it from a medical standpoint, which I thought was brilliant. And so I wrote in my book that when we got to the 17th through 19th amendments, I said, I write, the protesters left the gallery. They knew they had lost two. No more amendments were offered. The vote was taken and the bill passed. God won the day just like he said he would. What amazed me the most was the temperament of Dr. Oliverson. He stood there for hours, taking on amendment after amendment, never showing any signs of wavering or weakness, not one single time. I thought, God, you raised up this man for this hour. Here is an example of a modern day Daniel, full of the wisdom of God and a Babylonian system. So with that, Dr. Oliverson, welcome to the Daniel Report. We're glad to have you tonight. And tell us the story. We want to hear, what was it like for you being the author of the bill, having to stand up there under the fire of those amendments and the points of order? How did you keep your cool? How did you keep a level head? How did you make it through that season of life? Tell us the story. Our viewers want to hear about it.
Thank you, Brandon. I think you were overly generous and overly kind. no one has ever compared me to Daniel before, but I'm very humbled and honored for the comparison. I will just tell you, like, I think, and I've told people repeatedly, they say, how do you keep your cool in a situation like that? And I got to tell you that I think that was the power of the Holy Spirit. I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you how somebody just sort of stands there and just gets pummeled over and over and over again and never gets tripped up and always seems to know what to say. And I didn't have unlike Kamala Harris, I didn't have the questions in advance. I didn't know, what they were going to ask me. So I'm just trying to be honest and truthful and answer the questions and make sure that we're, doing things in a way that obviously they're not undermining the bill, which is the whole purpose of offering these amendments, is to try to poke holes in what you're doing and undermine the bill. I do strongly believe, as a lawmaker, I strongly believe that everybody, whether you're a raging progressive liberal or a fire breathing conservative, everybody was elected to represent somebody, and everybody deserves the respect and courtesy of being included in the conversation. I don't like it when people resort to name calling and stuff like that, and there's no place for that in the Texas House. But I do think that if you're going to offer a bill that some people don't like, you have to be prepared to stand there and defend it. You can't just walk away and say, "Oh, I'm not listening to this," or whatever. It's a collegial body. So I think, you have to be. I did have people come up to me, colleagues, and they were like, "This is not fair. They're being very critical of you. They're saying things which I know aren't true. They're attacking you. I'm so angry. I want to do something about it." And I was just like, look, just let them do what they're going to do. At the end of the day, they're going to run out of things to say. We're going to take a vote and we're going to win the day. Let them have this moment, because at the end of the day, this is all they're going to get. And that's always been my strategy as a lawmaker, is just be respectful, be honest. If you disagree, say why you disagree, argue, for what you believe is right. Don't compromise on your principles. But you can be uncompromising and also be kind and polite and respectful. And that's how I've always tried to be as a lawmaker.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, that goes a long way in our current political environment that's so hostile to anybody that disagrees with you. And you really set a good example of how to be a statesman. We need more statesmen and less politicians in this day and age. We really do, and you're right. You don't have to compromise your principles to be able to have an actual, conversation with other people that don't agree with you, but you're able to do it in a civil manner, which is what we used to have in this country back in the day. And we need to bring that back, I think, into government, is being able to dialogue with each other so that we can get things accomplished. So you did that so well. And, you mentioned the power of the Holy Spirit. One of the things that we were doing as we came to Austin on those buses every week is we were also bringing prayer warriors with us as well. And we were praying with Steve Toth on Tuesday nights with the Capitol Prayer Fellowship. And those evenings of prayer were so powerful. And I write about that in my book as well, especially on April 25th. Kristen and I organized the Day of Action and Prayer at the Capitol, and we did an all call for people to come lobby for the Millstone package of bills to protect Texas kids, and then to stay for prayer that night. And I remember that night as we prayed over SB 14, which actually at the time we were praying for HB 1686, your bill, but it became SB 14 because the Senate was able to push theirs through first. But as we were praying over that night, April the 25th, I remember just sensing from the Lord that the momentum was shifting in favor of the bill that night. And I just, going back to what you said about the power of the Holy Spirit, that absolutely had everything to do, I believe, with the success of the passage of SB 14. So I'm just glad that there are people on the House floor that are, listening to the Lord and allowing the Lord to direct their actions. So well done, sir. Well done. So Dr. Oliverson, let's change gears here for just a little bit. What is your take on Dade Phelan's leadership in the 88th session, and why has that predicated so many people throwing their name in the hat now to run for the speakership in the 89th session? I believe we're up to 5 opponents against Dade Phelan. Correct me if I'm wrong. 5, 6. Wow. Yeah. So tell me, why is everybody now running against Dade Phelan? What's going on, man?
Yeah, so I think I mean, you'd have to back up to the actual session and look at kind of where we began the session and where we ended the session. And I think what you'll hear a lot of people say that are defending the speaker is, well, we still passed a lot of conservative bills. And we did pass some good things, right? We passed, Kristen mentioned HB 900. We passed SB 14. These were important things, and we were glad to get them done. But that's not how we finished the session, right? Everybody remembers the last thing we did in session, which is that we basically turned our back on all of the voters in Texas and decided that we were going to impeach a man who had been, reelected as Attorney General overwhelmingly. And we did so using a process that really hadn't been invoked for 100 years. And then when we did, we didn't even follow the process that they followed last time. And I know I talked to many members who felt very conflicted because they just didn't feel like there was a process there, and they didn't feel like they had time, and they were being rushed, and they were being pushed, and they were being, sort of not really arm twisted, but sort of like hey, where are you on this kind of thing, right? And um, I think a lot of us that you would have thought would have at least had a chance to weigh in on this were not involved. In fact, to this day, as I'm sitting here with the two of you, I will tell you that I'm still not sure who actually knew this was going to happen other than Dade Phelan ahead of time. Obviously, Andy Murr probably did. But a lot of the people that you would think that he would talk to and get advice to say, like, hey, should we do this? How should we do this? Is this a good idea? Those conversations didn't happen. When the caucus asked for permission to have a meeting as a group to discuss what this meant, we were refused that opportunity. It was like, nope, we're just going to do this. We want to get it done, kind of thing. And it's just like, whoa, like, what's the hurry? So that really left, I think, a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, because there were a lot of little things leading up to that moment of situations where individual members had kind of been treated in some disrespectful ways that were very reminiscent of when Joe Strauss was speaker. Members were being told, hey, you better sit at your desk and be quiet and let this guy pass this bill and not cause any trouble, or you won't pass any bills this session. I think, Nate Schatzline has some pretty interesting stories to tell about how he was treated, and other members too, right? There's numerous members. And so you kind of knew there were some things percolating, but that was sort of the big deal. And then, obviously we failed to pass the school choice bill as well. And it turned into, a referendum. I think if you really look at what does the primary result tell us? Yes, that's a referendum on school choice. Yes, that's a referendum on impeachment. But honestly, Brandon, I think it's also a referendum on Dade's leadership. And I think that a lot of members felt like, and I've heard members say this, members who are not coming back next session, I did not ask for this. I did not vote because I came to the legislature wanting to impeach the attorney general, but I trusted that the leader was actually leading and that he knew what he was doing and that there was a plan and that it was all going to be okay. Because obviously, if he's asking me to do something this out of the box and this crazy, he must have a plan. And I've heard from senators too, same thing. Well, if they rush to impeach him that quickly, it must be really ironclad evidence against him, because no way they would be that careless that they would just sort of throw something over here hoping it would stick, right? But that wasn't the case, and the voters proved that on primary day that wasn't the case. So what I think you're seeing, and I know that was a long answer, but what I think you're seeing at the end of the day is that there's a growing number of members that recognize that his leadership has caused too many problems, too many heartaches, too many members losing their elections, too much damage, and that it is, you mentioned the millstone earlier. I think that's a good analogy. I think in a lot of members' minds, he has himself become a bit of a millstone around the necks of other members. And it's just like if you go on the House floor on day one and you vote for him, you just can't defend that. And you know you're going to get pounded because you know the district that you represent wanted change and you failed to give it to them. And so I think that's part of what you're seeing is, obviously somebody had to jump out first. Somebody had to say, hey, follow me, let's go. Let's take this hill. But I think you're seeing growing dissatisfaction. And by the way, I said 6 because it's not just Republicans now. There's a Democrat that's filed against him too.
I heard this
And
week.
interestingly enough, she did not vote for him for speaker in 2023. She was already that dissatisfied with his leadership that she didn't vote for him, apparently. So, yeah, we
Wow.
have 6 now. 5 Republicans challenging and 1 Democrat challenging.
That should tell you something, right? For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So,
So I think there's going to be change.
yeah, which is good. We need the change for sure. Well, I'm going to let Kristen now move into some questions about choosing the next House Speaker. So, Kristen, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, so Dr. Oliverson, you were at our SREC meeting just last month. And for those who are tuning in who don't know what the SREC meeting is or what it stands for, it's the State Republican Executive Committee quarterly meeting. And you gave this great presentation on how a House Speaker is chosen, because it's really a process that is done through the House Republican Caucus. And the Republican Party of Texas supports this process in our own platform. And so can you, share with everybody listening how that process works?
Yeah, glad to. Thanks for the question, Kristen. So first of all, I think it's important to note that this process was put into place in 2017 to basically put an end to the Strauss regime. And that was its express stated purpose. We had a speaker who had served 5 terms. He and his lieutenants were notorious for going to the caucus meeting and saying, show of hands, who's voting for the speaker on the House floor tomorrow? And then they would count, who is not raising their hand, right? Well, that person's going to get punished, right? So we wanted a process where Republicans could come together in a private setting as Republicans, caucus together, and choose one of their number that would be chosen by secret ballot. So there wasn't any speakers watching, see how you voted, you're going to get punished, you're going to get rewarded, but a secret ballot so that the only person that knows who marked the ballot is the person that marked the ballot, just like we vote. No pressure, no intimidation, no ability to reward people. And that they would caucus together, and in that vote of honesty, that they would choose somebody that they thought had the best chance of bringing about a successful session for the Republican members. So we set this process in motion. It has been used for the last 2 speakerships. So we've used it 3 times. Although once you get a speaker in office, as we did last time, it was sort of a re-election. It's not really much of a process, right? Because there's not really a campaign. Everybody comes in, they just sort of like, okay, re-elect the same guy kind of thing. But basically the way the process works is we nominate people. People are allowed to give a speech or a speech on behalf of somebody who's been nominated, sort of say why they're supporting that person or why they think they're the best candidate. And then we have these balloting processes. What we're looking for is at any point, if somebody gets 2/3 of all the members present and voting, that person is considered to be the caucus nominee. If we can't, then we eliminate the lowest vote getter until we get down to 2 people. At that point, we try to get 66%, 2/3. If after 2 rounds we can't get there, we'll try 2 more times to see if we can get 3/5. That's the lowest threshold. So in other words, we did not want somebody winning by a bare majority. We wanted it to be a super majority of members so that nobody could say, well, half of us didn't vote for this person, right? We wanted it to be a higher threshold than that. If nobody can get to that number, then all the nominees are discarded. We blow the whole thing up and we open it back up for nominations and we try again. And we keep going through that process until, as they say, the white smoke comes out of the chimney and we have our choice. That person then, having won the nomination, goes to the House floor, and according to our bylaws and also according to RPT, and there's a caveat I want to talk about, especially with regards to our platform and how that's changed. But we are supposed to go to the floor and vote for that nominee on the House floor in a unified Republican caucus way, and that thereby prohibiting us from ever doing a quote deal with the Democrats, which is what I think a lot of your listeners are hearing right now, that Dade's just going to do a deal with the Democrats. That's not supposed to happen. The caveat is, so RPT wisely amended the plank that deals with this to make it clear that as part of this process of nominating somebody in the caucus, we expect you to nominate somebody who is going to adhere to the party platform and ban Democrat chairs. So in other words, we don't want you going out on the floor as a unified body and voting for somebody who's not going to advance reform. We want somebody that's going to stick to the platform. We want somebody that's going to vote Republican and lead Republican, because after all, that's what we elected you to do. So that's the process. And you know, it has produced results. I will say the caveat is that people will say the process gets short-circuited. And what they mean when they say that is that the process was always envisioned that you would go to the caucus with as much Republican support as you could get as a candidate, and then you would lay your candidacy before the body of Republican caucus members, and the Republican caucus would get to that majority number with Republicans only. What we've seen happen in the past is that somebody will have a meeting before the meeting. They'll get as many Republicans as they can, although it's not 76 Republicans, which is what you need to win on the House floor. And then they'll fill in with a bunch of Democrats and they'll say, oh, I'm at 76. The speaker's race is over. Look at me. That's not how the process was envisioned. The process was envisioned in a mechanism so as to allow a Republican to get 76 or hopefully a united Republican caucus behind one candidate, so that we go out on the House floor as a united majority behind one individual. That's how it's supposed to work. It's never actually quite worked that way. And so that's kind of why you hear people say, well, you know, they don't always follow the process. The one other thing I want to say about this is that nothing in the bylaws prohibits a group of members from caucusing together ahead of the caucus as a subgroup of the caucus and saying, hey, we're the people representing change. And there's a lot of good change candidates, but we want to unify behind one change candidate because we think that gives us the best chance of winning the caucus. That's not prohibited under the caucus rules by any shape or form. Now, if you're not for change and you're for the status quo, then that doesn't really involve you, so that's fine. But especially in this circumstance where you have a group of reformers trying to take on and replace a sitting speaker who has made it very clear through his recent hires that he is not going anywhere unless we force him to go somewhere. It's important for those that want change to have a chance to be able to unify behind an agent of change, one person, and say, this is our champion. This is what change is all about. And we're all standing behind this person.
Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of that organizing taking place now. Remind us when that caucus vote is going to take place.
So the bylaws say that the caucus vote has to occur in December before we begin the regular session of the next legislative session. So this December. Obviously, you want to do it as early in December as you can, and that you can reasonably get everybody together, because you want to get that person picked and give them some time to get their staff together and get things kind of organized and sort of figure out, who goes where and all that kind of stuff so that they can be set up for success come January. The caveat is that people say, well, why wait till December then? Why not do it earlier? Well, the reason is because the election occurs in November. The actual caucus that would be subject to the next speaker and working with the next speaker and voting for the next speaker isn't actually created until after that election is done, because you're going to always have general elections where it could be close. You may gain seats, you may lose seats. Hopefully we'll gain seats this time. And so you want to make sure that those members are included so that everybody who's eligible to vote has a chance to vote, so that every vote matters in the caucus. And furthermore, because the results of the election, the ballots are not canvassed and sort of official until after the election. I think it's actually like a week and a half later, maybe 2 weeks later. Then we can't really do it before then. And if we do it right after then, now we're in Thanksgiving. And so that's why the caucus decided several years ago, like, hey, let's just do it as early as possible in December as we can, get after Thanksgiving, get everybody back together, and we'll do it then.
Yeah. And I think we'll have a lot of people watching that vote very closely. And as you said, we changed it in our Republican Party of Texas platform, and really to be more in line with what the grassroots are calling for, which is no Democrat chairs and those reforms that you hinted at.
So first of all, I mean, we need to fix the things that are broken, right? So we have bad communication problems within the chamber with members in terms of the way the Speaker's office interacts with members and the way members are treated. And some of that I was just talking about earlier, but those things have to be fixed. Members need to be respected. Members need to have the certainty of knowing what the schedule is. Members need a more transparent process for a lot of the things that are important to getting bills across the finish line, whether that's calendars, whether that's knowing that a bill that has a supermajority support of the majority is going to make it to the floor and get a vote, and that one person isn't going to put their thumb on it and hold it down. Those are important reforms that need to happen. We have parliamentary issues right now that are very serious where, you mentioned SB 14. The first point of order that was sustained on my bill was because I used the word pediatrician instead of pediatric. And they said that was materially and substantially misleading, which is silly. So then I said, okay, let me just delete the offending sentence so that you're not offended by it any further. And then I came back and they said, well, that's a second point of order because now you made an assertion about, doctors say that, and you didn't provide a citation for that. And I'm like, am I back in college English? I have to have a works cited page. So we've got parliamentary problems that need to be fixed. Some of you know that our current parliamentarian is a former Obama lawyer. And that does not speak to balls and strikes down the middle fairness. So a lot of things need to be fixed there. Second thing that's got to be fixed is the relationships outside the chamber. We have this bad habit in the House of going to war with everybody, right? And so we currently have a speaker that is fighting with the lieutenant governor, and everybody believes that if he's in the chair next session, it'll be World War III between the House and Senate, and nothing will get done. None of the priorities will get done because they can't even be in the same room really or talk to each other. It's just that it's gotten that bad. We're fighting with the attorney general. We're fighting with SREC. We're fighting with the state party chair. We are even fighting with the agriculture commissioner. I don't even understand how that happened, right? We have to stop fighting with everybody. The House needs the Senate in order to pass legislation. The House needs the governor. The House needs to work with the Attorney General's office and the Attorney General. The House needs to work with the party. So we need to repair all those relationships. So I want to, and you mentioned me going to the SREC, that was sort of my first olive branch of like, hey, if I'm the guy, I want to come and talk directly to the grassroots leadership as frequently and often as you'll have me, because I want you all to know that I'm accessible to you as the leader of the chamber, that I want I want to know when you're pleased with what the work that we're doing. And I want to know when you feel like we could be doing better. And I'm not going to let you, you're not going to have to go home and talk to the individual members about that. I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to make sure that you know that you can always call me. And I want the SREC, I want the leadership, I want the grassroots to be involved in this session as we work on these priorities together. I saw firsthand with SB 14, none of these priorities pass without the grassroots support. I had overwhelming support. You were both there. You saw that we filled the gallery, not once, not twice, but 3 separate occasions we filled the gallery with supporters. That means a lot to us. That emboldens us as lawmakers. It's so important. And we need to further those relationships. We need a leader of the chamber that sees the grassroots as an ally as opposed to an adversary, which is what we have right now. And then finally, there are some things that need to be done that haven't been done. We need to stop appointing Democrat chairs. We need to stop sharing leadership. I'll tell you a funny story. I'm the president of a national organization of state lawmakers that just does insurance policy. And it's a very bipartisan organization because it's all 50 states. And my vice president is a Democrat from New York. And she asked me, like, how's the speaker's race going? And I said, oh, it's going. She said, well, what's the main issue? And I said, well, we're trying to end the practice of appointing Democrat chairs. And she just grabbed my arm and she goes, wait, are you telling me that in Texas, as a Republican state, that you guys put Democrats in charge of committees? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, what is wrong with you people? We would never do that in New York. I mean, come on. And it's like, we are not, like people say, you're kind of, oh, we're setting a trend. We are at the tail end of history on this particular issue. We are not setting a trend of cooperation, right? Everybody else has moved on except for us. So we need to get that done. We need to get our legislative priorities done. We need to stop waiting to get our legislative priorities done until May. Thank God we were able to move, with the help of a great many people, we were able to move SB 14 through the process quickly, because it turns out we needed 3 tries to actually get to lay the bill out. And if that had been on the last calendar, it would have died. So these priorities, the Democrats don't want us to pass those things. Let's be honest. They're going to fight tooth and nail for those things to not pass. And that's their right. So we need to be proactive. We need to do more like what the Senate does, and we need to pass these priorities quickly and efficiently and get started early, and stop wasting the first 60 days of session. So those are some things that we're going to do. And the last thing I'm going to say is that we need to stop this practice of attacking members' local bills. I'm a big believer, as I said, I'm a big believer that people should be able to represent their districts. And there are members that I'm not always going to agree with politically, but they were elected by 200,000 Texans, and they have a right to have a voice, which means that if they've got a bill that's important to their district that doesn't affect the state and doesn't affect me, the speaker shouldn't hold that hostage just to extract something like a vote out of somebody. Well, if you don't do what I tell you, you're not going to pass your bill. That kind of intimidation tactic stuff has to stop. That is sort of the dark side of legislating, if you will, where instead of winning by persuasion, you win through threats and intimidation. And we're better than that. And we need to stop doing that.
I'm going to go ahead and segue into our next set of questions here. Dr. Oliverson, what is the number one issue facing Texas right now that we must act on in the 89th session? It's imperative. We cannot get out of session without acting on this one issue. What would you say is the number one issue in our state?
I think the number one issue that needs to be done for a variety of reasons is to get school choice passed. And I feel very strongly about that for a variety of reasons. Kristen would be able to name quite a few of them, because a lot of the things that she's working on very diligently to try to clean up in our school system is part of the reasons why parents are looking for other options, right? They want to get away from some of the stuff that they see in school districts like Eanes ISD, where they're basically, it's sort of the woke indoctrination train. Not all school districts are like that, which is why we use the word choice, right? It's not basically defunding. It's basically giving opportunity and letting people move. But I think this is unfinished business. It is time for us to basically put our marker down and get this issue across the goal line. I think the change in composition in the Republican caucus is largely reflective of a desire by both the voters as well as state leadership, the governor in particular, to make sure that this issue could get across the goal line this time. And my goal as speaker would be to get it done in the first 60 days so we can be done with this, right? We've already had this conversation. We kind of already know where everybody is on it. We need to get a bill to the floor. We need to vote on it, and we need to then move on to the other pressing things like border security, and continuing some of the work that we've done on protecting kids and correcting some of the issues that have cropped up. And I think for me, one of the things is now that we've gotten rid of the actual chemical and surgical mutilation of our children, we need to now turn to the mental indoctrination that is still happening and really try to shut down the school to clinic pipeline. That's one of my top priorities.
So staying on this topic here of school choice, I'm glad you brought that up because I had Cynthia Dunbar on my program earlier this year, and we also did an in-person meeting in Frisco with her as well, where she presented her proposal for school choice. And there's, I'm in the homeschool community, Kristen's in the homeschool community. It's very divided within the homeschool community about this because people are afraid of the government strings attached. And we have people saying, no, there will be no strings attached. And you got the ones that are like, this is going to be Armageddon for the homeschool community. They're going to start to, assess our kids and make us, pass college entrance exams according to, whatever Texas standards. So my question is, I know that Governor Abbott is pushing for the voucher program, which would receive basically a voucher, from the government that we could then use for private education. Cynthia has a different proposal, which I've been trying to raise awareness with, which is a property tax exemption. So basically, instead of my portion of my property taxes going to my ISD, I would basically exempt out of that portion of my property tax, and then I keep that money in my pocket so it doesn't go to the government and come back to me in the form of a voucher. It just is cash that stays in my pocket, and then I can use that cash to educate my children as I see fit. And there are people who feel that the property tax exemption is better at cutting the government strings because once the government gets their hands on the money, they like to dictate what you can do with the vouchers and requirements for the vouchers. I would like to get your take on both schools of thought. What is your thought on the best way to implement school choice in Texas?
Well, so first of all, let me just say, as a former homeschool dad myself, I certainly understand where folks are coming from, and I believe very strongly that children are a gift from God and they belong to families and to parents and not to communities and government, unlike our Democrat presidential nominee, who I just literally heard her say that yesterday about kids belonging to communities, which just made me want to pull all my hair out. That's horrifying, right? But but I am not in favor of any type of school choice program that would interfere with a parent's ability to provide education to their own children, if that's the route they want to go. I think there's nothing more holy and nothing more biblical than training up children in the way they should go, right? I'm literally quoting scripture here. That's special. My wife taught my oldest son. He was sort of struggling to read, and he was going into third grade, and so she pulled him out of the Christian school that we had him in, and said, "I can teach him. I have an education degree." He literally went from reading at a third grade level, but not very well, to reading at a ninth grade level in 1 year. And that experience is not uncommon for homeschool families, and so I don't want to do anything to harm homeschooling at all. So I am just going to say that as far as like what does school choice look like, I am not in favor of government regulating, uh, you know, parent administered school environments. I have often thought that one of the best compromises on this issue might be that we just junk all of A through F and all of accountability. And for these settings where, if we go the voucher route, if that's the way we're going to go, get rid of STAR, get rid of A through F, have everybody take a standardized nationally normed test of your choice, whether it's MAP testing, whether it's Iowa, whether it's Stanford. And those results have to be turned into the TEA, and then the TEA aggregates it by school and puts it on the website, and everybody can see. And then you let parents be the accountability mechanism so that parents can vote with their feet. If they say, oh, there's 3 schools in this area that my kid could go to, and this one, it looks like the 5th graders are passing with a 90% pass rate, and this school, they're passing with a 25% pass rate. Guess where I want my kids to go, right? I think that's accountability. And I also think that's not intrusive, because at the end of the day, those test results end up being de-identified and aggregated in a way to where, if it's individual families, that's obviously not a school setting that you could send your kid to, so it probably doesn't apply. But like if you're trying to compare like a private school and a public school, a single aggregated number, like how well did the 5th graders do, I think that's useful information. And I think that actually creates competition in the marketplace where schools now have something to strive to. They're not teaching to the test anymore. Now they're teaching to achievement, because there are these nationally normed, well-recognized measuring devices that are out there that everybody already uses. But now we're just publishing the results so we can compare apples to apples and across all 50 states. But to summarize, I would just say that I think this issue is going to end up wherever the members of the Texas House think that it should end up, from the standpoint of people have strong opinions, even within the Republican caucus, on this issue. And I think what we're going to do as a House, if I am going to listen to the members and I am going to let them help guide the conversation of like, what can we achieve this session? What is that landing point? What is reasonable? Where do we jump off? And I don't honestly know exactly what that looks like. I've told you some things I'd like to see, but I'm going to let the members help drive that conversation, because I don't think support for any one proposal is overwhelming. I don't think, opposition is overwhelming anymore. I think it's going to be interesting to see what we come up with.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the different viewpoints on that. I appreciate that. Well, Kristen, I'm going to let you take the last set of questions. Anything you want to ask Dr. Oliverson about policy or otherwise, and then I'll kind of bring the closing and conclusion. But Kristen, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say I love the thoughtful approach of considering different ideas, and I know that you love policy, and so I want everyone to hear what your approach to policy looks like.
So, Kristen, my approach to policy is that I am very, very agnostic when it comes to author. When somebody brings me an idea, I look at it and I say, what is the problem that they're trying to solve here? And does this solve the problem in the least intrusive way and the least expensive way that we could possibly do it? And if the answers to those questions are yes, then I have a track record in the Texas House of supporting people. I have stood at the front mic many a time when a Democrats had a bill that they were authoring that I thought was good policy, and I have lended my name and my support to that policy, because again, at the end of the day, I don't keep score very well. I tend to forget, if you were with me last time or whatever. I'm not one of those people that wants to remember that and to, get you back and all that kind of stuff, right? I take everything as it comes, as far as, is it good policy? Is it not good policy? I don't keep a record of wrongs. I think the Bible teaches us to be abundant in our desire to forgive one another. And so that's how I operate on the House floor. I move on quickly. I don't keep a record of wrongs, and I analyze each individual policy measure just based on whether it's good governance. And that's how I define good governance. Is it the least intrusive thing that we could do to fix this problem? And by the way, sometimes the least intrusive thing we could do is not do anything. Sometimes the solution is to let markets work, and to let competition solve problems for you. But sometimes you do have to act. And so then if you do have to act, is it something that's not intrusive? And is it something that's actually going to solve the problem? And is it going to be the least costly way to do it? So that's how I look at it. Now, I will tell you that everything I approach as a lawmaker, I approach with a biblical worldview. God has created the heavens and the earth. He is the center of my universe. I believe he called me to public service, and I will serve as long as it is his will for me to do so. And I won't bat an eye when he says it's time to go home. I'm not here for me. I'm not here for me. I'm here to serve him by serving the people of Texas. And so my worldview when it comes to policy is a very biblically aligned one. I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I believe there are only two genders. I believe that children are a gift from God and belong to parents and families. I believe that religious freedom is the cornerstone of this entire society, and without it, we will devolve into basically might makes right in a totalitarian state. I love one of our founding fathers, John Adams, when he said that our Constitution is a document sufficient only for a religious and moral people and is insufficient as a form of government for anything other than that. I think our founding fathers knew that without belief in God and without a belief in an afterlife and absolute right and absolute wrong, that society falls apart. Our government falls apart. So that's my worldview, and that's how I approach policy.
Very good. Before we end with Brandon, I want to mention very importantly Jill Glover, our former SREC from Senate District 12, who worked alongside you last session to get the pediatric gender modification bill passed, the ban on that. And that was something that Jill was so passionate about. It was so good to get that passed before she passed on and went home to be with the Lord. And so I want to just talk about the grassroots and how we help you in the legislature to drive some of these bills, and your thoughts on what we can do moving forward to continue to help out.
Yeah, great question, Kristen. Let me just say that I deeply miss Jill. I did not know Jill before the session began last session, but she was my strongest ally and literally became one of my best friends last session. And I deeply miss her. And she was an incredible warrior for conservative values and conservative policy. And at the same time, she was such a happy warrior. She just couldn't be defeated, right? And it wasn't, she wouldn't get super angry and yell and scream and stuff like that. She just solved the problem, and she did it with love and kindness. And I deeply miss her. But I think the grassroots are incredibly critical. I think that, truthfully, having you all in the Capitol is the difference maker. It is the X factor. It is the secret weapon. It is often the thing that that helps us to pass these things. These bills that we passed last session, whether it was protecting our female athletes from having to compete against men, whether it was drag queen story time, whether it was the Reader Act, whether it was getting rid of DEI and higher ed, whether it was SB 14, these were all things where people showed up from the community, from the state, throughout the process. I meet somebody almost monthly who comes up to me and says, "Thank you so much for SB 14. I was there. I was registered to testify. We ran out of time and I get to testify, but I want you to know I was there until midnight." And I'm just like, you know what? Thank you so much for that, because that's what makes the difference, right? We draw strength from the grassroots. I want to rebuild and strengthen that bond between House members and the grassroots, is because you are our secret source of strength. And when you're present in the gallery, when you're there in committees and you're testifying, it literally makes a lawmaker's day. When they've got an idea and they're fighting for it, and all of a sudden a group comes into the office that's from back home or maybe from different parts of the state, but they're all there because, hey, Rep, we're here for your bill. We came to testify today. We're here to support you. We appreciate what you're doing. That means the world to us. And it gives us such courage and such strength. And we need more of that. So I'll do everything in my power to fill the gallery every single day with folks, grassroots folks, supporters, because that is the secret sauce.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, Dr. Oliverson, that's a great segue into the bus trips for the 89th session. I'm putting a website address and a flyer up on the screen for y'all. If you go out to our website, danielnation.com/bus trips, you will see a Google form where we are taking information from those of you who want to go to the Capitol on January 14th of 2025, which is the first day of the session. And we're going to be supporting the selection for Speaker of the House. And also we'll be once again, out there letting the House members know that we don't want Democrat chairs on our committee for the 89th session. So we will be dressed accordingly, hint, hint. And so we want to make our presence known in the gallery again. And we're hoping that 1,000 people will show up on January 14th, just like we did last year on the first day of session. And with the correct speaker in place, I'm sure that the new speaker will not change the dates on us of when the chair committees are selected, so that our voices actually will be heard before those selections are made, which is why we're going on the first day of the session, because I'm pretty sure they can't change the day that the session starts, and we will make our voices heard as the grassroots. But we are working with the RPT, Republican Party of Texas, to fundraise for these buses. We do want to offset the cost of the buses, and we are trying to group our bus lines according to where people live around the state as best as we can. And that's why we need you guys to go to our website and fill out that Google form. And the RPT will also be sending this form out to all of the county chairs, as well as the grassroots around the state. They're going to be getting communications directly from the RPT with this exact form as well. So I just want to encourage everybody, now is the time to start thinking about going to Austin, getting your calendar set, whatever you need to do to make arrangements with your schedule. Now is really the time to think about mobilizing. And Dr. Oliverson, let me just end with this question. Because the Republicans are going to caucus in December to come up with their candidate, how can the grassroots go ahead and, lend their influence and support to the caucus? I know the public is not invited into your caucus meeting, but how can we let the members of the House know who we want the chair to be before January 14th?
Well, you just need to reach out to them, Brandon, and talk to them and let them know. I mean, it is obviously a private meeting, a secret ballot. I mean, that is, a process that is put in the Constitution, that the speaker would be chosen by the members of the House as opposed to the lieutenant governor, who's chosen by the people of Texas. But I do feel very strongly that that members of the Republican caucus care, for the most part, what the grassroots think. And I know that by the time we get to December, there will probably be at least there will be one person probably that is a reformer that we've all kind of united behind. Right now, obviously, there are 5 of us. By the time you watch this video, there may be less, right? Because we're talking here on Thursday, but tomorrow on Friday, the 20th, we're going to have a poll, a straw poll, if you will, and try to get united behind one individual. So by the time you're watching this, that may have already happened. But we need folks to encourage their members to support that process. And I mean, obviously, it's always better to encourage rather than to threaten. But the reality is that this is something the grassroots has been asking us to do for a really, really long time. And we're on the verge of actually doing it. And so nobody should be under the illusion that if somehow by sleight of hand or trickery, a speaker gets installed and sort of bypasses the entire question of Democrat chairs and everything just continues on as it always had. Nobody should be under the illusion that the folks back home will be anything other than truly angry at that result. And you have my commitment that I'm going to do everything in my power, whatever it takes, to make darn sure that the grassroots gets a record vote on Democrat chairs at the beginning of session, because you deserve that. We've asked for that repeatedly. We were cheated out of that last time. It's not going to happen again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that assurance. That gives us a lot of confidence in organizing to come down to Austin. Well, Dr. Oliverson, it has been a delight to have you on the Daniel Report tonight. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Kristen, thank you so much for being my co-host tonight. Being a part of asking wonderful questions to Dr. Oliverson. Dr. O, we can't wait to see you again in January. It's going to be a whistle stop tour between January and May. It always is, but we're going to be in the trenches with you, bringing the troops like we did last time. So bless you, sir. And we just pray Godspeed on everything you put your hand to do between now and January. God bless you, sir.
Thank you, Brandon. I greatly appreciate that. And Kristen, thank you so much for your leadership. You were one of those people that was in my office on day one saying, hey, I want to work with you on this bill. And here's who I am and what I'm doing. So I appreciate you both, and happy to come back anytime. I want better communication with the grassroots. That's going to be one of my top priorities. So if there's a mechanism by which we can all help achieve that together, I am all in on that, because I want people to be informed. I want them to feel like they know who their speaker is and that they can ask questions and they can express disagreement. And that's okay. That's okay. That's how we can better serve the people of Texas, is to be more connected to you all. So I thank you for this opportunity.
God bless you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Oliverson.